Welcome to Custom Homebuilders Solutions, also known as CHS, a job costing, full accounting, and profit management software designed specifically for the professional home builder. Please make this full screen for best viewing. This video is going to be addressing a new feature for helping some builders that have worked with CHS for a number of years, or new builders that decide to get carried away with their cost codes, to understand the concept behind CHS, and then to introduce some tools that I have for what I would call simplifying your cost codes. Cost codes in CHS are used throughout the program to compare cost centers. You can compare the budget to POs issued, change orders, and your actual costs. They are designed to be cost centers, and then there is something behind the cost codes. If you want to have detail for doing takeoffs and job budgets, there's something called items that you can set up behind the cost codes. So when I mean cost centers, you can see that this is an extremely NAHB recommended cost codes. There's only 300 and some odd, and you can see that this particular builder has ended up with over 1,000 cost codes, which, since these cost codes are used to compare things throughout CHS, the more cost codes you have, the longer it can take for CHS to do its job in doing your comparisons. And this video is going to be about cautioning, and there may be a set of one or two videos here about cautioning against making such detailed cost codes that seem to itemize everything that should really just be in one cost center. See all these 3920 point somethings? You can see that those are individual type items, all for surround sound pre-wire. You can tell they did one for 3920 and then a whole bunch with periods after it. The cost center, and the only cost code that I say should be here, should be 3920, with items that are all of these things behind the cost center, because you can set up items, bring those into your job budget, and you can have, you know, the unit prices for each item, etc., and then say that you want to bring those items in, and then select which items you'd like to have in your budget. I'm not going to tackle that cost code to show you. I'm going to use one that's a lot simpler because there aren't as many. But let's look at this brick, stone, fireplace, labor, material. That is the cost center, and that really is the only cost code that should be here. And then each one of these things that have the same number with a period should be items behind that cost center. You can see on one of the jobs, if I do what we call the estimated cost at completion, you can see that that you have 3 lines here that are showing up on the budget, and really there should be just one line. And I wanted to show you how these 3 lines that show actual costs, the budget, POs, how these 3 lines, once I use my tools, will suddenly all be in one line with 3 items behind it. What happens when you break out your cost codes so much, since we are comparing using cost codes across the board, when you issue a purchase order, it's expecting probably to be the total of these 3, but instead, in this case, by detailing these, and this is simplifying it, this work has been tripled. For somebody making purchase orders, they need to make 3 purchase orders and then somehow try to group them together if they want it to be all on one purchase order, where they could make one purchase order for this cost code and then detail with the items behind it that they need, instead of 3 times the work. Also, by issuing 3 purchase orders, then when they enter the bill from the person doing this brick stone labor for the fireplace, they're going to end up with 3 lines for that. You can actually see that there are 3 purchase orders issued to this JB Stone for this job. When you click, I went to the purchase orders menu and then I just narrowed down the search, and you can see that they've issued 3 different purchase orders when really there probably should have been 1. They were all issued on the same day, so they had 3 times the amount of work. You can imagine with those other cost codes that I was scrolling through, how many lines, how many individual purchase orders that they then try to somehow batch together. The employees have had to deal with, and when they're entering the bills. So what I'd like to show you is the tool that I have for getting some of this cleaned up and into cost centers. If you click this pencil edit icon, let's just tackle the ones that we saw on, there was one for raised hearthstone on the ECC. Let's just tackle those. So of course this thing won't, raised hearthstone and flat hearthstone. Let's just tackle those for a minute so you can see what happens, and then you'll grasp the concept. So if I click this pencil edit icon, you're going to see some tools that are on this screen. And one of those tools is, I'm going to go ahead and click this button for Move All Cost Records so we can talk about what it's telling you. First of all, it says make sure no other users. While you're running these utilities, you don't want to impact them trying to select something in a drop-down list when you're suddenly moving cost codes and cleaning up your cost codes master. This is going to move all records for all jobs in all tables in your database from one cost code to another cost code. It is usually used because you're trying to clear records from one cost code in order to delete that cost code. And then it says if you're trying to delete this, you'll go back and you'll delete it. You might, and then I'm going to show you in a minute that you can make this cost code raised hearthstone into an item behind the other one. So let's say we want to move all cost records into our main cost center. All cost records, all POs, all change orders, all actual costs. The cost code will be changed from this cost code to this cost code. So when I click that, it's going to move, it's going to ask me if that's really okay. And so I'm moving all the records in the entire database to that main cost code. And I'm going to close that. Then I'm going to create an item from this cost code before I decide to delete it. And I want the item to be under that same main one. So we'll select that 4111. This does some explaining. And it says if you want to delete this, you might want to go use the one I already used. And I'll do create new item. So a new item has been set up under that main cost center 4111. And if I click items, if I click this hyperlink for items right here, you're going to see that there's probably now one item under here, which is raised hearthstone. If that cost code had a default unit price on it and stuff, that would come in for this item. This little upload icon means you can actually take a picture of whatever this particular item is. But now this is the items behind this cost center. So we did the raised hearthstone. That was what we did, right? I'm talking so much. Yeah. So we want to go ahead and get rid of it. We know that if we want to, we can look at, to make sure, but let's see if we can just go ahead and get rid of it. If we look at the used, we'll see that it's not used anymore. So it's deleted that, it's deleting that cost code. And I want to go ahead and do the flat hearthstone, because I want you to see the effects of doing that. One thing you can do to speed this up, by the way, is let's do a field search for just those 4111s. 4111 all the way, and I'm going to hold down my shift key and just ask for those, and I'll do a search. So it's a good idea if you're going to start cleaning up things to go ahead and do a search, because when it comes back from cleaning up a deleted thing, it will bring back just that search, I think. So let's tackle the flat hearthstone and get it also moved into that main cost center. So let's move all records in the database. To this 4111. Move the cost records. Okay with me to move them all. So all cost records have been moved, and I'll close that. And before I leave here, I want to go ahead and make an item out of this cost code. And I want it to be under this main cost center. Create a new item. And then I'll close this. And I want to go check and make sure it's showing up as an item behind that main cost center now. Now you see I have both these items under raised hearthstone and flat hearthstone. So let's get rid of the flat hearthstone, because all the records have been moved and we've deleted it now. So we're getting less and less cost codes here, and we're slowly moving them up into this, and hopefully you can grasp that concept of doing that. Let's go back to the ECC for the job we were looking at, and let's refresh it. This is just sitting here and hasn't been refreshed with these three, but I'd like to show you what's happened. And you would normally have these screens closed while you're doing the work, but you could come and check some things, you know, first to see things. So now it's refreshed, and I want to go back to that 4111 area. Notice that we now have one line for that cost center, that it's got all of the, when we drill down and look at the budget that was originally there, and we'll go look at the budget screen, there's now a list of items behind that budget amount. It's taken care of it for you. It's created the items as it moved the records for you. So you can see that this budget line is for $894 with these three items. We still will have all the purchase orders because those are unique, but they will all have changed their cost code to this 4111. So when we look at a list of purchase orders, you'll see that they're all here with this 411 cost code. And in the future, you'd probably just have one purchase order for this $894, you know, if you repeated that concept. And you can see that the actual costs have also been moved, you know, to this one line. And if we go drill down on some of those things, it sometimes comes back and tries to refresh, and you can see your individual lines. So you can see that when the utility was run to move everything from the one cost code up into the cost code center, it took care of everything for you. Now what I'd like you to see real quickly is if you start a brand new budget for a job, I'm going to talk about the items for that, and I say I want to create a budget for this test job, and then I want to create it from my cost codes master, and it says it will also copy master items checklist in. So if I select that and I say okay, create a budget from all the cost codes master, of course we haven't cleaned up our cost codes, so we'll have a ton of cost codes on this budget when we open it here in a minute. But it's let's go ahead, and it brought in some things from our master, so it already has some amounts for various things, which just has to do with this particular builder. And this video really isn't totally about creating budgets and how those costs will come in based on various things, but you'll see the time that it's taking to bring this budget in. A lot of that has to do with all of those cost codes that are being used by this company. So it takes a lot longer to open these budgets because it's going to display all of your cost codes. And you see that there's 1,096 records. You could go ahead and, after you do your work, but that's one reason for the delay, is because look at all these cost codes for all of these things. Once you clean them up into centers, you'll be able to, let me see if I can get to the 4111s. Here we go. So we haven't cleaned up all these cost codes yet. But what I'd like you to see is if I click on, and in the future, once these are cleaned up also and gone, you would have one line for brickstone. And if I click this items over here, those will have come in. So when I'm doing my budgeting, I can just click on the items. Of course, because of all the cost codes it's searching through for these items, it'll take a little bit longer, but that's why I'm suggesting that you clean these things up. But notice how the two items that we moved into 4111 are here. If they had some default pricings on them, that would have dropped in, so that would have been great to already have the amount. So you can set up your items amounts over there behind it. So let's just say this is going to be 400, I don't know, and I'll save that. And then let's say this will be 300 or something. If those prices had come in, then you'd be well ahead of the game. But when you set up your items, but notice that those items are there, and I could check mark that I want them on the budget. I want them to be included on the budget. And then, if there's some other items you don't want included on the budget, you could leave them here to help remind you once you have several items for this cost code. I could have clicked select all if I wanted all the items to come in instead of check marking them one at a time. But what I'm going to show you is when I close this and I've now looked at my items for this, and then I say use items, click use items. Notice that these items came in. I need to submit it. They came in as my budget number, and I'm good to go. So when I'm entering bills, I can drill down on this budget and I can see the items behind it, but I should only have to enter one bill for the $700. I can also, there's quite a delay on validating and submitting just because of all the cost codes also. But if I add a new PO from this 700, I don't want to create it from here. I'm going to create the PO while I'm over here because I know about the PO. I could create it from many places, but I want to create it from the items so that the purchase order also has the items. And I know this video is going on, but I think it'll give you some good tips for how you can use items. You can get as detailed as you like with items because items won't bog down the purchase orders, or I'm going to issue one purchase order for both of these items. So I'm going to say new PO and new PO. I'm going to click those so that they'll both be on there. I could also have done select all for that, but now you'll see that there's $700 up here for creating a purchase order. Then I can create my purchase order for JB Stone and continue to create it, and it gets pretty well created for you for that $700 with the items being on the purchase order. If I click here, you'll see that it's $700, and I click here on the items just to take a look at them. You'll see that they're there, the items behind the PO. And if I close this and I just print this purchase order, you'll see that those items are listed on this purchase order also. So I hope this helps you get the concept of using items instead of detailing your cost codes. I hope this lets you see that you can still do your budget detail and have the detail by using items rather than a whole bunch of cost codes for that. And that everything in CHS, since those cost code centers are used throughout CHS, it's for any variance report, for any type of ECC. And on the ECC itself, in this case you would add 3 lines you have to check mark that the work is done, and 3 lines to check on, instead of managing by exception, having one cost center, and then only being concerned about it when that cost center goes over. CHS is designed based on the concept of managing by exception, and not actually ending up not being able to see the forest for the trees. And if the total, you can have as much items, but if the total goes over for that cost center, that's when the boss gets alerted, not on every single little individual item. I hope that helps, and that's the end of this very long video. Bye-bye.